My cheating wife ended up hospitalized with her lover's toy, so I took everything and walked away. The harsh ring of Thomas's phone cut through the darkness of his bedroom like a knife. His consciousness struggled through layers of sleep as he fumbled across the nightstand, knocking over a glass of water before finding the vibrating device. The screen blazed bright at 2:17 a.m., displaying an unknown number. The empty space beside him in bed seemed to mock him. Charlotte should have been home hours ago from her weekly book club meeting. She'd left at 7 o'clock, wearing a new blouse he'd never seen before, a trace of unfamiliar perfume trailing in her wake. "Don't wait up," she called over her shoulder, the front door closing with a final click. "Hello," his voice emerged, rough with sleep, his throat tight with unexplained dread. "Is this Thomas Crawford?" The male voice on the other end was professional, controlled, with an undercurrent of tension that made Thomas's pulse quicken. Speaking, Thomas sat up straighter, sleep falling away like a discarded blanket. "This is Officer Stephen Parker with the Metropolitan Police Department." The officer paused, and Thomas could hear the careful selection of words that followed. "Sir, I'm calling about your wife, Charlotte Crawford. There's been an incident." Thomas's fingers gripped the phone tighter. "What kind of incident? Is she hurt?" "She's been found in a concerning condition at the Pine Grove Motel on Hamilton Street. Emergency services have transported her to Memorial Hospital. You should come right away." The Pinarov Motel. Thomas's mind raced, trying to make sense of the information. That was across town, nowhere near where her book club supposedly met. What was she doing there? "I understand you have questions, Mr. Crawford, but I can't provide more details over the phone. The emergency room staff will brief you when you arrive," Officer Parker said, his tone carefully neutral, but something in it made Thomas's stomach clench. Today. As he ended the call, Thomas switched on the bedside lamp. Warm light flooded the master bedroom, their bedroom, and his eyes fell on the framed photos dotting the dresser, their wedding day. 8 years ago, Charlotte radiant in white, a vacation in Hawaii 3 years back, both of them laughing on the beach. Recent snapshots showed subtle changes he tried to ignore. Charlotte's new highlights, the designer clothes, the way her smiles seemed more practiced than genuine. While pulling on jeans and a sweater, fragments of memories from the past year began to surface. Charlotte's phone always face down on tables, the way she'd angle her laptop screen away when it entered her home office, those urgent work emails that always seemed to arrive during dinner, the yoga studio membership she insisted on. Despite the one closer to their house having better reviews, he dismissed each red flag, trusted her completely. What kind of fool was he? The drive to Memorial Hospital seemed both endless and too quick. The streets were nearly empty at this hour, streetlights casting intermittent shadows across his face. Ash gripped the steering wheel. He barely noticed running a yellow light, his thoughts consumed by that single word, motel. Thomas pulled into the hospital parking lot, tires crunching over loose gravel as he took the first available space. The emergency room entrance loomed. Ahead, its fluorescent glare harsh against the pre-dawn darkness. His footsteps echoed in the quiet lot as he rushed toward the sliding doors. Inside, the reception area assaulted his senses with its sharp antiseptic smell and buzzing fluorescent lights. A nurse looked up from her station, her name tag identifying her as Grace. She had kind eyes and crow's feet that deepened as she noted his distress. "Can I help you?" she asked, fingers already poised over her keyboard. "My wife," Thomas managed, his voice hoarse, "Charlotte Crawford, The police called about her. Recognition flickered across Nurse Grace's features, followed by something that looked uncomfortably like pity. "Yes, Mr. Crawford, please have a seat. Dr. Wilson will be out to speak with you shortly. I'd rather stand." Thomas began pacing the waiting room, his shoes squeaking against the freshly waxed floor. The space was nearly empty at this hour, just an elderly man dozing in a corner chair, his chin tucked against his chest, and a young mother cradling a feverish toddler. The minutes crawled by like hours. Thomas checked his phone repeatedly, though he knew it wouldn't show any messages from Charlotte. Hurless's text had been at 6:45 p.m. heading to book club. "Don't wait up." The casual depth of it made his jaw clench. The double doors leading to the treatment areas swung open, and a tall man in surgical scrubs emerged. His ID badge read Dr. James Wilson, Chief of Surgery. "Mr. Crawford." "Yes, that's me." Thomas stepped forward, studying the doctor's face for clues. "How's Charlotte? What happened to her?" Dr. Wilson gestured toward a more private corner of the waiting room, away from the other patients. His expression was carefully composed, professional, but there was an awkwardness in his manner that set Thomas' nerves on edge. "Your wife is in surgery right now," Dr. Wilson began, keeping his voice low. "We're working to remove he paused, clearly uncomfortable, "a foreign object that's become lodged internally. It's a delicate procedure, but she's stable. A foreign object." Thomas's mouth went dry. "What exactly are you talking about?" Dr. Wilson shifted his weight, his discomfort obvious now. "I'm afraid I can't provide more specific details at this time. What's important is that we're addressing the immediate medical. Officer Parker would like to speak with you about the circumstances of your wife's admission." As if on cue, a police officer approached them. He was younger than Thomas had expected from their phone conversation, maybe early 30s, with a boyish face. That seemed at odds with his serious expression. "Mr. Crawford," Officer Parker extended his hand. "If I could have a moment of your time." Thomas shook the offered hand mechanically, noting the officer's firm grip and the way his other hand rested near his weapon. A habitual stance, probably, but it added to the surreal quality of the moment. "There are some details about the situation you need to be aware of," Parker continued, leading Thomas a few steps away from Dr. Wilson. "Your wife was found in room 114 at the Pine Grove Motel. The security cameras recorded another individual leaving the room in a hurry. Shortly before we received the 911 call, Thomas felt bile rise in his throat. Another individual, a male subject approximately 6 feet tall, athletic build. The footage isn't clear enough for positive identification, but we're working on enhancing it." Parker paused, choosing his next words carefully. The room showed clear signs of intimate activity. The fluorescent light suddenly seemed too bright, the antiseptic smell too strong. Thomas leaned against the wall, his legs unsteady. The past year of small doubts and dismissed suspicions crashed over him like a tidal wave. "I want to see her," he said abruptly, pushing away from the wall. "Now, sir, she's in surgery." Dr. Wilson started to protest, but Thomas was already moving toward the operating room doors, his feet carrying him forward as if as "Mr. Crawford, you can't go in there," Nurse Grace called after him, but he ignored her, bursting through Theodore's into the surgical wing. The corridors stretched before him, doors labeled, or 1, or 2, or 3. Through the small window in the third door, he could see a cluster of medical personnel in surgical gowns and masks. In the center of their attention lay Charlotte, unconscious, on the operating table. Before anyone could stop him, Thomas pushed through the door. The scene that greeted him would be forever branded in his memory. Charlotte's pale face partially hidden behind an oxygen mask, her body draped in blue surgical sheets, and there in the surgeon's hands, the unmistakable shape of what they were working to remove. A massive dildo, its presence a grotesque confirmation of his worst fears. "Sir, you cannot be in here." A nurse tried to block his view, but it was too late. Dr. Catherine, the assisting surgeon, rushed to usher him out. "Mr. Crawford, please," she insisted, her voice firm but kind behind her surgical mask. "We need to maintain a sterile environment. Your wife's safety depends on it." Thomas allowed himself to be led back to the waiting room, his mind numb with shock and revulsion. He collapsed into a chair, the vinyl squeaking beneath him, and buried his face in his hands. The wedding ring on his finger felt like it was burning his skin. Through the large windows of the waiting room, he could see the first tints of dawn breaking over the city. The night sky was shifting from black to deep blue, stars fading as morning approached. Thomas sat rigid in his chair, every muscle tense, with anger and betrayal. In the growing light, his soul hardened like steel. He would uncover everything, every lie, every deception, every moment of infidelity. There would be no room for excuses, no possibility of forgiveness. As the sun began to rise, Thomas Crawford made an assolant vow. His wife would regret the day she decided to betray him. Morning sunlight crept through the hospital window, casting long shadows across the sterile room. Thomas sat in an uncomfortable vinyl chair, watching Charlotte's unconscious form on the bed. The rhythmic beeping of monitors provided a steady backdrop to hishing thoughts. His wedding ring felt heavy on his finger, a weight that seemed to mock 8 years of trust and devotion. The surgery had ended 2 hours ago. Dr. Wilson had assured him it was successful, though his carefully neutral tone couldn't hide the awkwardness of the situation. Now Thomas waited, his mind replaying every suspicious moment from the past year through thelons of his new knowledge. A slight change in Charlotte's breathing pattern drew his attention. Her eyelids fluttered, fingers twitching against the white hospital sheets. Thomas leaned forward, his expression hardening as he prepared for the confrontation he'd been in his mind. Charlotte's eyes opened slowly, confusion clouding their blue depths as she took in her surroundings. The moment she registered Thomas's presence, fear flashed across her features, quickly followed by shame. "Thomas." Her voice was raw, barely above a whisper, the oxygen monitor on her finger trembling as she reached toward him. What happened?" "That's what I'd like to know." Thomas's voice could have frozen the summer air coming through the window. "Why don't you tell me about your evening at book club?" Charlotte's fingers clutched at the thin hospital blanket, knuckles white against the pale fabric. Everything's fuzzy. Let me help clear things up for you." Thomas leaned forward, his gaze drilling into hers. "Room 114, Pine Grove Motel. Ring any bells?" The color drained from Charlotte's face. A tear slid down her cheek as the memories visibly crashed over her. "Thomas, please, who is he?" The question hung between them like an executioner's blade. The steady beep of the heart monitor increased its pace, betraying Charlotte's rising panic. "His name is Andrew," she finally whispered, each word seeming to physically pain her. Her fingers worried at the edge, off the blanket, unable to meet Thomas's gaze. "I met him at Radiance Yoga Studio 6 months ago." 6 months. Thomas's voice was deadly quiet. 6 months of lying to my face. 6 months of betraying everything we built together. It wasn't supposed to happen. Charlotte's words tumbled out in a desperate rush, her hands fluttering like trapped birds as she tried to explain. We were just friends at first. He was my instructor, and we talked after class. He understood things about me, about what I wanted. Spare me the romantic details of your seduction. Thomas cut her off, disgust evident in every word. I want his full name now, Andrew Mitchell. Charlotte wiped at her tears with shaking hands, smearing her mascara further. He teaches the advanced classes. Thomas, what happened? What you saw? He pushed me to try things. When it went wrong, he left me there alone. Of course he did. Thomas stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the linoleum floor. The sound made Charlotte flinch. That's what happens when you let someone use you like a cheap toy. That's not fair. Charlotte's voice rose with desperation, cracking on the last word. I made a mistake. Yes, but a mistake. Thomas's laugh was hollow, echoing off the sterile walls. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. A mistake is missing a deadline. What you did was make a choice. Every time you lied about where you were going, every time you met him, every time you let him touch you, those were choices, Charlotte. Deliberate, conscious choices to destroy a marriage. A nurse appeared in the doorway, drawn by their raised voices. Is everything all right in here? Fine, Thomas snapped, not taking his eyes off Charlotte. Just having a conversation with my wife about her extracurricular activities. The nurse hesitated, looking between them before reluctantly withdrawing. Her footsteps hoed down the hallway, leaving them alone with the weight of their crumbling marriage. Thomas pulled out his phone, holding it up like evidence in a trial. Where's your phone, Charlotte? Her eyes widened, panic replacing the tears. What? Your phone? The one you're always guarding, like it contains state secrets. The one you never leave unattended. Where is it? I think. The police have it. Charlotte's voice was small, defeated. They took my belongings when the ambulance brought me in. Thomas Wazelready, striding toward the door, his purpose clear. In the hallway, he found Officer Parker talking with a nurse at the station. The young officer straightened as Thomas approached, clearly reading the intent in his expression. I need my wife's phone, Thomas said without preamble. It's evidence of her affair with Andrew Mitchell. Parker's eyebrows rose at the name. She identified him. Yes, he's an instructor at Radiance Yoga. I want to see every message, every photo, every piece of evidence of their relationship. Mr. Crawford, Parker's tone was professional but cautious. The phone is currently logged as evidence in an ongoing investigation. An investigation? What? A consensual affair gone wrong. Thomas's voice was sharp. Are you actually going to charge him with abandoning her there? Parker studied him for a long moment before nodding slightly. Follow me, they walked. In tense silence to a small office where evidence was being processed. Parker retrieved a clear plastic bag containing Charlotte's belongings, her purse, clothing, and the phone with its cracked screen. The passcode, Thomas demanded, taking the phone. 824. Charlotte's weak voice came from the doorway. She stood there, in her hospital gown, clutching an IV pole for support. Her face was pale, dark circles under her eyes, making her look ghostly in the fluorescent lighting. It's your birthday. The irony of her using his birthday as her passcode while betraying him made Thomas's jaw clench so hard he could hear his teeth grind. He entered the numbers, and the phone unlocked to reveal a messaging app open to a conversation with AM. What he found made bile rise in his throat. Months of messages, each one a new betrayal. Miss you already, can't what, until Thursday's book club meeting. Last night was amazing. I love how you make me feel so free. Your husband's really working late. Again, his loss is my gain. Pictures followed, each one driving the knife deeper. Charlotte and lingerie he'd never seen. Intimate photos clearly meant for Andrew's eyes. Selfies of them together after their encounters, both glowing with post-coital satisfaction. But worst were thigh massages, mocking him, laughing at his trust, joking about how they fooled him. Poor Thomas. So focused on his career, he doesn't even notice his wife sneaking away. He actually believed I was at a work dinner. Some lawyer he is. Thomas shook with rage as he scrolled through month after month of betrayal. Each message a fresh wound. Each photo another crack in the foundation of their marriage. I'm taking screenshots of everything, he told Officer Parker, his voice tight with controlled fury. I want it all documented for my lawyer. Of course, Parker's tone was careful and neutral. We'll need to keep the phone as evidence, but I'll make sure you get copies of anything relevant to your legal proceedings. Thomas nodded curtly and pulled out his own phone, dialing a number he'd hoped never to need. Jim, it's Thomas Crawford. He turned away from Charlotte's pleading gaze. I need you to draw up divorce papyrus immediately. I want everything. The infidelity clause, full documentation of her affair, all of it. I have proof of a 6-month relationship, including explicit messages and photos. Charlotte's sob from the doorway would have broken his heart a day ago. Now it only fueled his resolve. Divorce. She stumbled forward, nearly tangling herself in the IV line. Thomas, please, we can work through this. I'll go to counseling. I'll do anything you want. Please don't throw away 8 years of marriage. I didn't throw it away. Thomas's voice was razor sharp as he turned to face her. You did, with every lie, every secret meeting, every time you chose him over me. It wasn't like that. Charlotte reached for his arm, but he jerked away from her touch as if but what Andrew and I had, it wasn't real. It was just physical. You're my husband. I love you. Love. Thomas spat the word like poison. Is that what you call it? Letting another man touch you, laughing with him about deceiving me, sharing intimate details of our marriage with a stranger. I'm sorry, Charlotte sobbed, her legs trembling beneath her hospital gown. I'm so sorry. Please, Thomas, give me another chance. We can fix this. We can go to marriage counseling. Start over. Start over. Thomas's laugh was bitter. And what would we build it on, Charlotte? More lies, more deception. The foundation of our marriage is gone. You destroyed it piece by piece every time you met him in that motel room. It was a mistake, she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. The biggest mistake of my life. I'll never see him again, I promise. You'll quit yoga, change my number, anything you want, what I want. Thomas stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Is my wife back? The woman I trusted completely. The woman I would have died for. But she's gone, isn't she? If she ever existed at all. Charlotte swayed on her feet, the color draining from her face. A nurse rushed headford to steady her, shooting Thomas a disapproving look. She needs to rest. The nurse said firmly, this conversation can wait. No, it can't. Thomas straightened his jacket, his expression cold. Because there is no more a conversation to have. All communication goes through my lawyer from now on. He turned to Officer Parker. I trust you'll get my wife's statement about her encounter with Mr. Mitchell. Parker nodded, his professional mask firmly in place. We'll be conducting a full investigation into the incident. Good. Thomas's voice was clipped. Send any relevant documentation to my lawyer's office, Jim Davidson at Davidson and Associates. He'll be handling everything from here on out. Thomas, please. Charlotte's voice was barely a whisper. No, don't leave like this. Don't let it end this way. He paused in the doorway, not turning to look at her. You ended it, Charlotte. Every time you walked into that motel room, every time you lead to my face, every time you let him touch you, this is just making it official. The sound of her collapse behind him, the nurses rushing to help, the monitors beeping an alarm, none of it made him turn back. The woman he loved was already gone, replaced by a stranger who had betrayed him in the worst possible way. There would be no forgiveness, no reconciliation, no second chances. As he stepped into the elevator, Charlotte's broken sobs echoed down the hallway. He let the doors close between them, as final as the death of their marriage. In the polished metal off the elevator walls, his reflection stared back at him, a man forever changed by betrayal, his trust shattered by repair. Morning sunlight streamed through the floor, tasseling windows of Davidson and Associates, casting long shadows across the mahogany conference table where Thomas sat, reviewing the final divorce settlement. The thick stack of papers before him represented the death of his marriage, each page outlining the precise terms of its dissolution. Jim Davidson, his attorney, sat across from him, radiating satisfaction as he adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. The morning light caught the silver in his temples, highlighting the experience etched in the linicero in his eyes. He'd earned every one of those lines fighting battles like this. I have to admit, Thomas, Jim Biggin, his tone carrying a note of professional pride. This is one of the cleanest victories I've seen in 20 years South divorce law. The infidelity clause in your prenup was ironclad, and the evidence we gathered was overwhelming. Thomas's fingers traced the edge of the settlement papers. Break it down for me, Jim. I want to hear every detail. Of course, Jim pulled out a summary sheet, his MLANC pen tapping each point as he explained. First, the house. It's yours free and clear. Charlotte's name has been removed from the deed. The same goes for both vehicles and our investment accounts. What about her claim to my law firm shares? Denied completely. The judge was particularly unseated given the circumstances. Jim shuffled through more papers. She keeps only what she brought into the marriage, her personal effects, her pre-marriage savings, and her car. Everything acquired during the marriage goes to you as per the prenup's infidelity clause. Thomas nodded, his expression remaining carefully neutral. And the medical bills her responsibility entirely. The judge actually cited Heracles' behavior as justification for not requiring you to contribute. Jim allowed himself a small smile. The hospital incident really worked in our favor. A knock at the door interrupted them. Patricia, Jim's longtime secretary, entered, carrying a thick manila envelope. The final divorce decree just arrived from Judge Henderson's office, she announced, placing it carefully on the table. And Mr. Crawford, does a detective here to see you about the Mitchell case? Thomas exchanged glances with Jim, who nodded. Send him in, Patricia. Detective Marcus Reed entered, his weathered face bearing the tired expression of someone who'd seen too much of humanity's darker side. He carried a leather portfolio under one arm and declined the offered seat with a shake of his head. Mr. Crawford, Mr. Davidson, He acknowledged them both. I wanted to deliver this update in person. Andrew Mitchell accepted a plea deal this morning. Thomas's hands flattened against the table. What are the terms? 3 years with the possibility of parole after 18 months, mandatory counseling, and registration as a sex offender. Reed pulled out some paperwork. The DA pushed shade hard after we uncovered similar complaints from other students at the yoga studio. Other complaints? Thomas' voice carried a dangerous edge. Reed nodded grimly. 3 other women came forward after. Your wife's case went public, all with similar stories. Mitchell using his position as an instructor to initiate relationships, pushing boundaries, engaging in increasingly risky behavior in the studio. Jim interjected. I heard as o feisty day there. Insurance dropped them when the pattern of incidents came to light. Reed's expression hardened. Mitchell won't be teaching yoga to anyone for a very long time. Thomas absorbed this information, his jaw working silently. What about Charlotte's statement? Did she cooperate fully? Reconsulted his notes. Her testimony was crucial to the plea deal. She provided detailed accounts of how Mitchell gradually escalated their encounters, pressured her into more extreme acts, then abandoned her when things went wrong that night. A muscle twitched in Thomas's cheek. Did she mention how willing she was, how she laughed with him about deceiving me? Mr. Crawford, Reed's tone was professional but sympathetic. I understand your anger, but your wife was also a victim of Mitchell's manipulation, ex-wife. Thomas cut him off coldly. As of today, she's me ex-wife. Red nodded in acknowledgement. Of course. Well, that's all I needed to share. The DA's office will send formal documentation for your records. After the detective left, Thomas stared at the divorce decree, its gold seal gleaming in the morning light. 8 years of marriage reduced to legal terminology and property divisions. There's something else you should know. Jim said carefully. Charlotte's lawyer contacted me this morning. She's in serious financial difficulty. Thomas's expression didn't change. Explain. The medical bills alone are over $50,000. Then there's her legal fees. Lost wages from the yoga studio closure. Jim spread his hands. She's facing bankruptcy. Not my concern. No, it's not, Jim agreed. But she's desperate. Her lawyer hinted she might try reaching out to you directly. She already has. Thomas pulled his phone, displaying a screen full of missed calls and unread messages. Letters to my office, emails, voicemails. Have you responded to any of them? No. Thomas's voice was firm, and I won't. She made her choices. Jim knows she can live with the consequences. The intercom buzzed, and Patricia's voice came through. Mr. Davidson, Miss Crawford is here. She's quite insistent about speaking with Mr. Crawford. Thomas's expression darkened. Tell her. The door burst open, and Charlotte rushed in. She looked nothing like the polished yoga instructor she'd been just weeks ago. Her designer clothes had been replaced by worn jeans and a simple sweater. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her carefully maintained highlights had grown out, showing mousy roots. Thomas, please, she began, her voice cracking. I know I have no right to be here, but you're right. You don't. Thomas stood, buttoning his suit jacket. Jim, call security. Wait. Charlotte moved further into the room, her hands clasped in supplication. I've lost everything. The studio, freedom. No one will hire me to teach after what happened. I can't even make my rent. And how is any of that my problem? Thomas's voice could have frozen fire. Did you think about consequences when you were sneaking around with Mitchell? When you were laughing with him about deceiving me? I was wrong." Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. "So terribly wrong, but Thomas, 8 years of marriage has to mean something." "It meant something to me." Thomas cut her off. "It meant everything to me until I found out it was all a lie." "Not all of it," Charlotte pleaded. "What we had was real. I got lost somewhere along the way." Andrew was, don't say his name. Thomas's hands slammed down on the conference table, making Charlotte jump. "Don't you dare try to explain or justify what you did." "I'm not justifying it." Charlotte's voice rose with desperation. "I'm trying to apologize to make you understand." "Understand what?" Thomas's laugh was bitter. "How you betrayed every vow we made. How you made a fool of me. How you threw away our marriage for cheap thrills with a yoga instructor." "It wasn't like that." Charlotte took a step toward him, but Thomas backed away as if her proximity might contaminate him. "It was confused, unhappy. Andrew seemed to understand me. Understood you so well he left you bleeding in a motel room." Thomas's voice dripped with contempt. "Is that the great understanding you're talking about?" Charlotte's face crumpled. "He's going to jail because of what happened. Isn't that punishment enough? Do you have to destroy me, too?" "I didn't destroy you, Charlotte. You destroyed yourself." Thomas turned to Jim. "Are we done here?" Jim nodded, gathering the signed papers. "Everything's in order. The divorce is final as of today." "Good." Thomas moved toward the door, pausing only. When Charlotte called out one last time, "I still love you," she whispered. Thomas didn't turn around. Love doesn't lie. Love doesn't betray. Love doesn't make a mockery of trust. What you feel isn't love, Charlotte. It's desperation, and it means nothing to me. The sound of her broken sob followed him into the hallway, but Thomas didn't look back. He nodded to the security guards, who had finally arrived, leaving them to deal with removing his ex-wife from the building. The elevator ride to the parking garage gave Thomas time to compose himself. In the polished metal walls, he studied his reflection. Designer suit, fresh haircut, new watch. The external changes reflected the internal ones. Gone was the trusting fool who'd believed in forever. In his plus stood a harder, colder man who would never make the same mistakes again. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Andrew Mitchell's name appeared on the screen. "I'm heading to jail tomorrow. I know you hate me, but please look after Charlotte." What happened wasn't all her fault. Thomas blocked the number without responding. Let them comfort each other with their guilt and regrets. He was done with both of them. The drive home took him past yoga studio where it had all started. The windows were dark now, a fist sign hanging prominently in Thefront. Another casualty of choices and consequences. His new apartment building rose ahead. All glass and steel and modernity. No memories haunted these halls. No ghosts of betrayal lurked in the corners. The doorman nodded as Thomas entered, taking the private elevator to the penthouse level. Inside, floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. Thomas poured himself a scotch and watched the sun setting over the urban landscape. On his finger, the tan line where his wedding ring had been was finally fading. His phone buzzed again. An email from Jim. Final paperwork filed. Charlotte's lawyer says she's moving to Seattle next week. Clean break, fresh start for everyone. Thomas deleted the email without reply. Seattle might as well be another planet. Distance wouldn't change what had happened. Wouldn't erase the betrayal that had reshaped him. The city lights began top twinkle on as darkness fell. Thomas raised his glass. In a silent toast, 2 lessons learned and bridges burned. The mon he'd been had died in that hospital room, watching surgeons extract the physical evidence of his wife's infidelity. The man who emerged was stronger for the pain, wiser for the betrayal. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new beginnings. But tonight, Thomas stood alone in his fortress of glass and steel, finally free of the weight of love and trust, and all the wounds they brought with them. Let Charlotte and Andrew carry the burden of their guilt. Let them face the consequences of their choices. Thomas Crawford had emerged from the ashes of his marriage, transformed, not bitter, but harder, not broken, but reinvented. The city spread out before him like a field of stars, full of possibility. For the first time since that late-night phone call had shattered his world, Thomas felt truly, completely free. The next story, I caught my fiancée cheating with my own brother. Now they're jobless, homeless, and hated. Jax, whose full name was Jack Morgan, stood at the kitchen counter, a steaming mug of coffee in his hand and a smile on his face. The Atlanta morning sun streamed through the window, catching the sparkle of Alyssa's engagement ring as she moved about the kitchen. "Only 3 more weeks," Jack said, his voice tinged with excitement. Alyssa turned, her blonde hair swaying as she met his gaze. "I can't believe it's almost here," she replied, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Jox didn't notice the slight tension in her posture as he gulped down his coffee. His mind was already racing with the day ahead, a big project at work, and last-minute wedding preparations filling his thoughts. "Eager to run," he said, planting a quick kiss on Alyssa's cheek. "See you tonight for dinner," she nodded, watching as he grabbed his briefcase and headed out the door. As Jack navigated the morning traffic, his phone buzzed. A text from his younger brother Derek Reed. "Hey bro, we still on for lunch?" Jack sighed, a mix of affection and exasperation washing over him. Derek was always needing something, but he was family, and Jox felt that familiar pull-off responsibility. "Sure," he texted back. "Usual place at 12:30. The morning flew by, in a flurry of meetings and phone calls. Before he knew it, Jox was sliding into a booth across from Derek at their favorite diner. Soderick began flashing his trademark charismatic grin. "How's the wedding planning going?" Jox couldn't help but smile. "It's good. Busy, but good. Alyssa's got most of it under control." "That's great," Derek replied, high sighs darting to his phone. "Listen, I hate to ask, but I'm in a bit of a bind." And there it was. Jox felt his holders tense as Derek launched into a convoluted story about a missed sales quota and a potential eviction. It always came down to money with Derek. "How much?" Jox asked, cutting to the chase. Derek had the decency to look sheepish. 2,000, just until my next commission check comes in." "I swear," Jack rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. "Derek, you're 30 years old. When are you going to get your act together?" I know, Derek said, holding up his hands. "I'm working on it. This is the last time, I promise." It was a promise Jox had heard before, but he found himself reaching for his checkbook anyway. Family was family after all. Ash wrote out the check. Jox missed the flash of guilt that crossed Derek's face. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and wedding preparations. Before Jox knew it, the night of their engagement party had arrived. The backyard of their parents' suburban home was transformed with twinkling lights, strung between trees and the smell of barbecue filling the air. Jack stood near the makeshift bar, watching as Alyssa mingled with guests. "She's quitty a catch," his father, Roy, said, clapping him on the shoulder. "You did good, son." Jack smiled, pride swelling in his chest. "Thanks, Dad." His mother, Carla, bustled over, pulling him into a tight hug. "Oh, my baby boy, all grown up and getting married." "Mum," Jocks protested, but there was no real annoyance in his tone. He loved his parents, even if they could be a bit overbearing at times. The night wore on, filled with laughter and congratulations. As the party began to wind down, Derek clinkered at his glass, calling for everyone's attention. "If I could have a moment," he said, his voice carrying across the yard, "I'd like to say a few words about my big brother and his beautiful fiancée." Jocks felt Alyssa tense beside him as Derek began to speak, but he was too caught up in the moment to notice. "Jocks has always been there for me," Derek continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Through thick and thin, he's had my back, and now he's found someone who complements him perfectly." He raised his glass toward Alyssa. "To Jocks and Alyssa, may your love only grow stronger with each passing day." The guests cheered, and Jax pulled Derek into a fierce hug. "Thanks, little brother," he whispered as they embraced. Jocks missed the quick-loaded glance that passed between Derek and Alyssa. The days that followed were a whirlwind of final wedding preparations. Jocks threw himself into his work, eager to wrap up a big project before taking time off for the honeymoon. It was late one night, nearly midnight, when Jocks's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Curiosity piqued. He opened it, swelled shattered. There on the screen were photos and a video. Alyssa and Derek tangled together in various states of undress. The timestamp showed they were recent, some from just days ago. Jocks felt like he was going to be sick. His hands shook as he scrolled through the images, each one driving the knife deeper into his heart. He didn't sleep that night, his mind racing with questions and accusations. When morning came, he was waiting in the kitchen. When Alyssa emerged, blurry-eyed and yawning. "We need to talk," Jack said, his voice cold and flat. Alyssa froze, sensing the change in his demeanor. "What's wrong?" Without a word, Jack slid his phone across the counter. Alyssa's face drained of color as she saw what was on the screen. Jock's eye. "Can explain," she began, but he cut her off. "Explain what?" he snapped. "How you've been sleeping with my brother. How you've both been lying to my face." "It's not what it looks like," Alyssa pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. "Those photos, they must be fake. Someone's trying to break us up." JX laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Don't insult my intelligence, Alyssa. I know what I'm looking at." The argument that followed was explosive. Accusations flew back and forth. Voices raised and tilthy were both. Finally, Alyssa crumpled, sinking to the floor as sobs racked her body. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Jack stood over her, his anger giving way to a deep, aching pain. "How long?" he hissed, his voice barely audible. Alyssa looked up, her makeup streaked down her face. 6 months, she admitted. The confession hit Jocks like a physical blow. 6 months, half a year of lies and betrayal. "There's more," Alyssa said, her voice trembling. I'm pregnant." Jocks felt the room spin. He gripped the counter to steady himself. "Is it mine?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Alyssa shook her head. "I don't know," she whispered. "It could be yours or Derek's." In that moment, Jocks felt something inside him break. The future he had imagined, the life he had been building, crumbled to dust. "Get out," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Pack your things and get out of my house." Alyssa tried to reach for him, but he recoiled from her touch. "Jocks, please, we're done," he said, finality in his tone. "The wedding is off. I never want to see you again." As Alyssa retreated to the bedroom, sobbing, Jocks's thoughts turned to Derek, his own brother. The betrayal cut deep, leaving a wound he wasn't sure would ever heal. With shaking hands, he dialed his parents' number. When his mother answered, he could barely get the words out. "Mum," he choked, "I need to talk to Dad. It's about Derek." An hour later, Jack stood in his parents' living room, pacing like a caged animal. When the front door opened and Derek sauntered in, Jack saw red. "Hey, what's the emergency?" Derek's words were cut off as Jocks's fist connected with his jaw. "You son of a Jocks," growled, grabbing Derek by the shirt and slamming him against the wall. "How could you?" Derek's initial shock gave way to a smug grin, even as blood trickled from his split lip. "Bro, you can't blame me. Alyssa came on to me, said she needed a real man." The taunt pushed Jocks over the edge. His fists flew, pummeling Derek's face and body. "She's carrying your child," he roared. "My fiancé, my future." It took both Roy and Carla to pull Jocks off his brother. Derek slumped to the floor, his face a mess of blood and forming bruises. "Boys, stop this," Carla cried, her voice shrill with panic. "We're family." Roy stepped between his sons, his face ashen. "What in God's name is going on here?" Through gasps and sobs, the story came out. Carla collapsed onto the couch while Roy stood. Silent, disbelief etched on his face. "Jocks," Roy finally said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Violence is never the answer. We need to sit down and talk this through as a family." Jack stared at his father in disbelief. "Talk it through? Are you serious? Your brother made a mistake." Carla interjected, her voice pleading. "But he's still family. We can work this out." Jocks looked from his mother to his father, then to Derek, who was being tended to by Carla. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. They were going to forgive Derek again, just like they always did. "No," Jack said, his voice cold and final. "Not this time. He's not my brother anymore, and if you choose to side with him, then I don't have parents either." He turned and walked out of the house, ignoring his mother's cries and his father's calls to come back. As he climbed into his car, a new emotion began to rise within him, pushing past the pain and betrayal. Rage, pure, unadulterated. As he drove away from his childhood home, Jocks's mind raced. Who had sent those photos and video? Why, now? Just weeks before the wedding, and more importantly, what was he going to do about it? One thing was certain, Derek and Alyssa would pay for what they'd done. And whoever had exposed their affair, well, Jocks wasn't sure I've wanted to thank them or destroy them, too. Either way, he was going to find out who it was, and then he would have his revenge. The North Carolina mountains loomed in Jocks's rearview mirror as he drove into the small town now called home. It had been 3 months since he'd left Atlanta, 3 months since his life had imploded. The rage that had driven him here had cooled too. A simmering anger, but it still burned within him, fueling his every move. Jack pulled into the driveway of the modest cabin he rented. As he stepped out of the car, his phone buzzed, an unathermist call from his mother. He ignored it just as he had ignored the dozens before it. Inside, Jocks booted up his laptop and opened his work emails. The remote engineering contracts he'd taken on provided a steady income, and more importantly, the solitude he craved. No office politics, no small talk, nor reminders of his old life. As he scrolled through his inbox, a new email caught his eye. The subject line read, "Derek Morgan, confidential information." Jox's heart raced as he opened the email. It contained detailed records, after-Rick's work transactions, including several deals that had been suspiciously inflated. The sender was anonymous, but message was clear. This was ammunition. A cold smile spread across Jox's face. "Got you, little brother," he muttered. Over the next few days, Jox meticulously went through the information, verifying its authenticity once he was certain. He created an anonymous email account and composed a message to Derek's company's her department and board of directors. His finger hovered over the send button. Was he really going to do this? Destroy his brother's career? The memory of Derek's smug face taunting him about Alyssa flashed through his mind. Without further hesitation, Jox hit send. The fallout was swift and devastating. Within a week, news reached Jox through old contacts that Derek had been fired. His reputation in tatters. Jox allowed himself a moment of satisfaction, but it was fleeting. This was just the beginning. As the weeks passed, Jox's focus shifted. The question that had nagged at him since that fateful night resurfaced. Who had sent him those photos and video? He had begun to obsess over it, spending hours each night going through old contacts, cross-referencing numbers, and reaching out to former friends for any leads. One evening, as Jox was poring over his notes, a name jumped out at him. Maya Thompson, Derek's ex-girlfriend, the one he had dumped for Alyssa years ago. Could it be? Jox wondered aloud. Heffened Mia's contact information and after a moment's hesitation, sent her a text. "Maya, it's Jox Morgan. I know it's been a while, but I was hoping we could meet for coffee. There's something I'd like to discuss." To his surprise, Maya responded almost immediately. "Jox, it's been ages. Sure, I'd love to catch up. How about tomorrow at 2 p.m. at the Bluebird Cafe?" The next day, Jox found himself sitting across from Maya in a cozy coffee shop. She looked much the same as he remembered. Dark hair, piercing eyes, and a smile that didn't quite reach those eyes. "So, Jox," Mia said, stirring her latte, "what brings you to this neck of the woods? Last I heard you were getting married in Atlanta." Jox's jaw clenched. "Plans change," he said curtly. Mia's eyebrow arched. Do tell." Jox studied her face, looking for any sign that she might already know the story. "It's a long, ugly tale," he said, "but I'm more interested in hearing what you've been up to. Still in marketing?" Maya nodded. "Yep, just got promoted to executive level." She paused, a sly smile playing in her lips. "I heard about Derek's troubles. Such a shame." The casual way she mentioned it set off alarm bells in Jox's mind. He leaned forward, his voice low. "Maya, I have to ask, did you have anything to do with what happened?" Maya's smile widened, but she didn't answer directly. Instead, she said, "Yalk no Jox, there's an old saying, what goes around comes around." Derek made a lot of enemies over the years. It was only a matter of time before it caught up with him. Jox felt a chill run down his spine, the knowing look in my eyes, the subtle smirk. She knew more than she was letting on. But before he could press further, Mia changed the subject, steering the conversation to safer topics. As they parted ways, Mia's words echoed in Jox's mind. He was more convinced than ever that she was involved somehow, but he needed proof. Back At his cabin, Jox's phone rang. It was Alyssa. He stared at the screen, his thumb hovering over the decline button. After a moment's hesitation, he answered. "What do you want, Alyssa?" he said, his voice cold. "Jox, please." Alyssa's voice was desperate. "I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need your help." Jox laughed bitterly. "My help? Are you serious? Please, just hear me out," Alyssa pleaded. "I'm in my 3rd trimester now, and Derek, he's completely abandoned me. I have nowhere else to turn." Jox felt a mix of emotions, anger, pity, and a small, unwelcome pang of concern. "What about the baby?" he asked, despite himself. "That's why I'm calling," Alyssa said, her voice breaking. "Jox, there's a chance. There's a chance the baby could be yours. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you. We could take a paternity test. If it's your child, don't you want to know?" Jox's mind reeled. The possibility that child could be his hadn't even occurred to him. He'd been so consumed by his anger and plans for revenge. That'd pushed all thoughts of the pregnancy aside. I need to think about this," Jack said finally. "I'll call you back." He hung up, his head spinning as he tried to process this new development. Another piece of information reached him through his network of contacts. Derek had moved in with a wealthy socialite, a woman Hemet through his former job. He was already living off her money, showing no sign of taking responsibility for Alice or the baby. The news reignited Jox's anger. Derek was still the same selfish, irresponsible person he'd always been, but now Jox had a new target for his revenge. Over the next few days, Jox gathered information on Derek's new living situation. He learned the socialite's name, Vivian Carroll, and her address in an upscale Atlanta neighborhood. An idea began to form in his mind. Jox picked up his phone and dialed Derek's number. It went to voicemail. "Derek, it's Jox," he said, forcing his voice to sound conciliatory. "Look, I know things have been difficult between us, but you're still my brother. I think it's time we talk. Try to work things out. Give me a call when you get this." He hung up, a grim smile on his face. The bait was set now. He just had to wait for Derek to bite. It didn't take long. The next day, Jox's phone rang. Derek's name flashed on the screen. "Hey, big brother." Derek's voice was cautious. "I got your message. Are you serious about talking?" Jack swallowed his disgust. "Yeah, I am. I've had some time to think, and well, we're family, right? Why don't we meet up, have a drink, try to sort this mess out?" He could hear the relief in Derek's voice. "That sounds great, Jox. Really great. When and where? How about next Friday? There's a bar downtown called the Rusty Nail. Say 8 p.m. "I'll be there," Derek said quickly. "And Jox, thanks for reaching out. It means a lot." As Jox ended Thekel, he felt a twinge of something. Regret, guilt. He pushed it aside. Derek had made his choices. Now he had to live with the consequences. The week leading up to the meeting dragged on. Jack spent his days working, his nights planning. He reached out to several of Derek's old colleagues and family friends, casually mentioning Thath and Derek would be at the Rusty Nail on Friday night trying to patch things up. He knew word would spread. Finally, Friday night arrived. Jox arrived at the bar early, securing a table with a clear view of the entrance. He nursed a whiskey, his stomach churning with a mix of anticipation and dread. At 8:05, Derek walked He looked thinner, Jocks noticed, and there were dark circles under his eyes. For a moment, Jocks felt a flicker of the old brotherly concern. Then he remembered why they were here, and his resolve hardened. "Jocks," Derek said, sliding Ginto, the seat across from him. "It's good to see you." Jocks nodded, not trusting himself to speak just yet. He gestured to the bartender for another round. So Derek said, fidgeting with his napkin, "How have you been?" Jocks took a deep breath. "Cut the small talk, Derek. We both know why we're here." Derek's face fell. "Jocks, I know I messed up badly, but I want to make things right. Tell me how I can fix this." Jocks laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Fix this? You think you can fix this?" His voice rose, drawing the attention of nearby patrons. "You slept with my fiancée, Derek. You got her pregnant. You destroyed my life. And for what? A cheap thrill." Derek's eyes widened as he realized this wasn't the reconciliation he'd hoped for. "Jocks, please keep your voice down." But Jocks was just getting started. He laid out every betrayal, every lie, every time Derek had let him down. As he spoke, he noticed familiar faces entering the bar. Derek's former colleagues, family, friends, just as he'd planned. "And now, Jack," said, his voice dripping with contempt, "you're shacked up with some rich woman mooching off her money, while Lissa struggles alone with your child. You're pathetic, Derek. You always have been." Derek stood up, his face red with shame and anger. "You set me up," he hissed. "You never wanted to make peace. You just wanted to humiliate me." "No, Derek," Jack said calmly. "You humiliated yourself. I'm just making sure everyone knows who you really are." As Derek stormed out of the bar, Jocks caught the shocked and disgusted looks on the faces of the onlookers. He knew that bemoaning Derek's reputation would be in tatters once again. The next day, Jocks met Mia for coffee again. This time, how was direct. "It was you, wasn't it?" he said without preamble. "You sent me those photos and videos of Derek." And Alyssa Mia didn't deny it. Instead, she smiled, a cold, satisfied expression. "Derek ruined my life when left me for Alyssa," she said. "I've been waiting years for the right moment to return the favor. When I found out about their affair, I knew it was time." Jocks felt a strange mix of gratitude and unease. "Why didn't you tell me at Wazoo before?" Mia shrugged. "I wanted to see what you'd do with the information. I have to say, I'm impressed. You've dismantled Derek's life quite thoroughly." As they talked, Jocks realized that he and Mia shared a common goal, seeing Derek pay for his actions. It was a cold comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. The weeks that followed were a blur. Jocks received the paternity test results. The baby wasn't his. He cut all ties with Alyssa, blocking her number and email. Derek, unemployed and newly single, Vivon had kicked him out after learning the full story. Seen Tobe drifting from one failed scheme to another. Jocks threw himself into his work, taking on more challenging projects. He moved to a larger apartment in the city, slowly rebuilding his life on his own terms. One evening, as he stood in his new office, looking out over the city skyline, Jocks felt something he hadn't experienced in months' peace. The anger that had driven him for so long was still there, but it no longer consumed him. He thought about Derek and Alyssa, about the baby that would grow up in the middle of this mess. For a moment, he felt a pang of regret for the scorched earth approach he'd taken. But then he remembered the betrayal, the lies, the years off cleaning up Derek's messes. No, he decided. He'd done what needed to be done. He'd taken control of his life, refused to be a victim, and now, finally, he was free. As the sun set over the city, Jack smiled to himself. He had served the betrayal, emerged stronger, and no one would ever hurt him like that again. 6 months had passed since their confrontation at the Rusty Nail. 6 months of silence, broken only by whispers of Derek's continued downward spiral. Jocks stared at his phone, Derek's name glaring back at him from the screen. His jaw clenched. Ash hit the call button. Jocks, Derek's voice crackled through the speaker, a mix of weariness and surprise. We need to talk, Jock said, his tone cold and flat. In person, tomorrow night, 8 p.m. The park near Mum and Dad's old house. Jocks, I don't think be there. Jocks cut him off, ending the call before Derek could protest further. The next evening, Jocks arrived at the park early, his body tense with anticipation. As the sun began to set, he saw Derek's approaching figure. His brother looked haggarded, clothes wrinkled, and hair unkempt. Hey, Derek said cautiously, keeping his distance. Jocks didn't return the greeting. Instead, he fixed Derek with a hard stare. I want to know why, Derek. Why, Alyssa? Why destroy everything? Derek flinched at the directness. I don't know, Jocks. It just happened. Jack sparked a laugh. Things don't just happen. You made a choice. Both of you did. I'm sorry, Jocks, Derek pleaded. Igno, it doesn't change anything, but I am truly deeply sorry. Jocks laughed bitterly. You're right. It doesn't change a damn thing. He leaned forward, his voice low and menacing. How's life treating you, Derek? Enjoying the consequences of your actions? Derek's shoulders slumped. I haven't seen Alyssa or the baby. I can't face it. Typical, Jack sneered. Always running away from your responsibilities. You're pathetic. What do you want from me, Jocks? Derek asked, his voice breaking. I've lost everything. My job, my reputation, my family. I want you to suffer, Jack said coldly. I want you to wake up every day knowing that you destroyed the only people who ever truly cared about you. I want you to live with that guilt for the rest of your miserable life. Derek looked up, tears in his eyes. Can't we move past this? We're still brothers. No. Jocks cut him off. We're not. You're dead to me, Derek. This is the last time you'll ever see me. Don't try to contact again. With that, Jocks stood and walked away, leaving Derek alone on the bench. He felt no remorse, no pity, only a cold satisfaction that justice had been served. The next morning, Jocks met Maya for coffee. She studied his face. Ash sat down. How did it go with Derek? How did you know about that? Jocks asked, raising an eyebrow. Mia shrugged, a small smile playing on her lips. I have my ways. Jocks leaned back, fixing her with a steady gaze. It's time for few-hole truth, Mia. Why did you really send me those photos and videos? Maya's smile faded. You want the truth? Fine. I loved Derek. When he left me for Alyssa, it broke me. I spent years putting myself back together, always what she had that I didn't. She paused, her eyes hardening. When I found out about their affair, I saw my chance for revenge. I knew if anyone could make Derek pay, it was you. You used me, Jack said, his voice devoid of emotion. Yes, Ma admitted. But can you honestly say you regret knowing the truth? Jax thought for a moment. No, he said finally, but don't think that makes us friends. You're just as manipulative as Derek. Maya nodded, accepting his judgment. Fair enough. What will you do now? Move on, Jack said firmly. Leave of this behind. Over the next few weeks, Jocks threw himself into his work with renewed intensity. He took on more edge-lenging projects, pushing himself to new limits. His colleagues noticed the change, commenting on his laser focus and increased productivity. One evening, as he was finishing up a complex design, his phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, Jocks. It's Alyssa. Jocks's grip tightened on the phone. What do you want? I wanted to let you know the baby was born last week. A girl. I named her Lily. Why are you telling me this? Jocks asked, his voice cold. Because, Alyssa said, her voice breaking. Even after everything, you deserve to know. And I'm sorry, Jocks. I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know how sorry I am. You're right, Jocks said, his tone unchanged. It doesn't change anything. Don't contact me again, Alyssa. Ever. He ended Thekel, feeling nothing but a dull ache where his heart used to be. The next day, Jocks made a decision. He accepted a job offer from a prestigious engineering firm in Seattle. It was time for a fresh start, far away from the ghosts of his past. On his last night in Atlanta, Jack stood in his empty apartment, looking out over the city skyline. He thought about the past year, the betrayal, the anger, the revenge. He had let it define him, shape him into someone harder, colder, but he didn't regret it. The world had shown its true colors, and he had adapted. His phone buzzed with a text. From Maya, heard you're leaving town. Drinks to celebrate. Jocks typed out a response. No, goodbye, Maya. He hit send, then powered off his phone. As he locked the door to his apartment for the last time, Jocks felt a grim satisfaction. He had survived the betrayal, emerged stronger. He walked out of the building, and into the warm Atlanta night, ready to face whatever came next. The past was dead, the future uncertain, but one thing was clear. Jocks Morgan would never let anyone close enough to hurt him again. He climbed into his car, casting one last look at the city that had been his home, the place where he had lost everything and found a new version of himself. Without a hint of remorse or nostalgia, he started the engine and drove away, leaving behind the ashes of his old life and the people who had burned it to the ground. In the end, Jocks realized forgiveness was overrated. It was the refusal to forget, the cold determination to move forward without looking back that truly set him free.